just surrounding.
Damn, I gotta go pick that up. All of that just for a 3-second clip that might get me copyrighted. What's going on, everybody? This is Cadillac Mike with Crossing Aces Media. A Day to Remember is one of our favorite bands here. Being around since the mid-2000s, to say they're very well loved between the punk rock community. With A Day to Remember announcing that they're going to be remastering their For Those Who Have Heart album, we wanted to take a look back today at all their studio albums and determine what is the best song off of each. Now, this video is purely opinion-based. If you guys have a different opinion, post down comments below and tell me what your favorite song off the album is. But without any further ado, if you guys enjoyed the video, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Let's go on and get into it.
I've read this or your 1,000 times.
Starting off our list today is the very first studio album A Day to Remember released, and their name was Treason. So the number one spot I'm going to give to this is You Should Have Killed Me When You Had the Chance. Mainly because it really incorporates all of what A Day to Remember is going to be in the future into one single. When you go back and listen to this album, a lot of the songs either drift one way or the other. They go really pop acoustic style, or they go really hard and metal. This one right here kind of solidifies what A Day to Remember is known as, pop punk. They have the heavy riffs along with the singing chorus that incorporates the sound perfectly for A Day to Remember. So for their first studio album, 2005, I'm gonna give it to You Should Have Killed Me When You Had the Chance. Right on this list, we're gonna go on to the second studio album A Day to Remember released, the one that they're currently going to remaster coming out in October, For Those Who Have Heart. The number one spot on this one's gonna go to Monument. Now, it's important to note when I'm doing this list right here, it's only the studio album as it was released. I'm not going to include any remasters, current remasters, reissuings, anything like that that include bonus tracks, because I do know, I believe it was either this one or Homesick has Since You've Been Gone added to it in the reissue. I'm not going to include it in here for that sole reason. Same thing with the first studio album, except in this one, it's not so much about the sound as they keep the song very pop oriented until the drop at the end, and then it's just a little quick 15-20 second drop. But the message they give is just perfect, and I love this song, so Monument's gonna take the number one spot on For Those Who Have Heart. A Day to Remember is solidified with being underdog. And that's what Monument's trying to represent here, is a song for the underdogs. When people tell you you're not gonna make it, this is what you listen to remember, hey, there's still hope. This is a song for the hopeless, and it's a really good song. It was actually one of the very first A Day to Remember songs I heard besides the next entry on this list. Alright, I lied on that previous entry. The song I was referring to is on the next album, mainly because I forgot about Old Record. I completely forgot they even made this, and I like to believe I'm a hardcore Day to Remember fan, so I'm making this whole video, but until I was actually making the list, I forgot that they made this in between For Those Who Have Heart and their next album. Going back and give this one a quick listen, I had to give it to 1958, just mainly because it was the only one I remembered listening to repetitively off this album when it came out, along with I love how heavy it is. I love that it's a really just deep song, like not deep lyrics, but deep. Honestly, it's a great song. Old Record's gonna get 1958 as their number one spot. This entry was very hard to do when I was making the list. I had to sit there and I had to listen to it over and over and over again. Definitely took A Day to Remember to new heights they hadn't had beforehand, solidifying them with the mainstream audience. This album has banger after banger after banger, and honestly it's hard to give a number one spot on this. But as previously stated, we're only doing the album as it was released. No reissuings, no remasters. So, between Mr. Highway's Thinking About the End with one of the heaviest drops that A Day to Remember has in their whole set list, or Holding It Down for the Underground, which has a lot of personal meaning to me, the number one spot on A Day to Remember's album, Homesick, is going to go to I'm Made of Wax, Larry, What Are You Made Of? I love everything about this song. It was the very first song I ever heard of A Day to Remember, and to go a little bit beyond that, it's the very first song I heard that got me into the metal genre. If you want to consider A Day to Remember metal, I'm talking about just the electric guitars, the drums, the heaviness. It was the very first song I remember ever listening to when I was 11 years old by my stepbrother, and it just grabbed my attention. I gravitated toward it. Between the heavy riffs, the heavy drop, music video being one of my all-time favorites, This album was by far the hardest one to pick a choice on, but I'm Made of Wax, Sorry, What Are You Made Of is taking the #1 spot for nostalgic reasons and Musical reasons, it's a great song. This album is very hit or miss to a lot of A Day to Remember fans, with A Day to Remember only having one more album to drop under the Victory record label. They come out with What Separates Me From You. And I remember at the time this was a very controversial album to a lot of A Day to Remember fans, coming right off the heels of Homesick. Had this movement with A Day to Remember that they were leaving the metal genre behind, and they really were kind of selling out to go mainstream, which we'll get to a little bit more here in a minute. And personally, I never felt that way, and it's mainly because the main song, their number one song on the Billboard, not my number one, not the number one on this list, All I Want, was very pop oriented. It got a lot of attention, garnered a lot of attention, but those who knew what A Day to Remember were capable of, it just wasn't what A Day to Remember was. It wasn't that mix. They kind of went one way too far. However, this album does have quite a few heavy songs in it, which is where my number one pick on this album comes from. You Be Tails, I'll Be Sonic. I love this song. It kind of goes back into the incorporation of what I was talking about and holding it down for the underground. I love the meaning and I love the lyrics to this song. Other meaning that they always put behind their songs is literally the name of the last album. They're homesick. They miss home. Even though they look back on it fondly because it was everybody who told them they wouldn't make it. They missed the days, but they still have what they have now. In a lot of ways, they're like the Yankees with this album. They went from being the underdogs to the franchise players. They were the head, they were the face of pop punk there for a little bit. So I know this album will either be an S tier and F tier to a lot of people. Personally, me, I think it's an S tier album. After A Day to Remember left Victory Records, they set out on their own branch and their own path in life to create A Day to Remember Records. And with this being the first album that they released, Common Courtesy is definitely an S tier among the community. They take a step back toward Homesick and they incorporate that perfect mix. However, this album has one of the best acoustic songs I think A Day to Remember has ever released, Already Gone. I love the dynamic range that Jeremy gets to show off in that song. But it's not number one. It's not my number one pick. My number one pick on this album is the song that directly follows Already Gone on the album, Violence. It is the exact opposite of that song, and that's why I love it so much. It is nothing but pure screaming and chaos. I love the mix. I keep saying that multiple times in this video, but I love the mix that Day to Remember does. I don't like, however, when they do a whole album one way or the other, which is what a lot of people said about What Separates Me From You. They went way too pop on it. This album has the perfect mix. It has pop-oriented songs, it has very hard songs, and it has the songs that mix perfectly. With that all being said, Violence is my number one. So this is going to be the other controversial pick on this list. It's not so much the pick as it is the album. This being the second album that Day to Remember released under their own label, I remember it didn't do that well with the fans. Me personally, I don't actually remember even listening to it a whole lot. I remember when it came out, I remember it got a little bit of publicity, but for the most part, I really didn't listen to a whole lot of it. So going back and listening to it for the sake of making this list, I'm gonna give it to the title song of the album, Bad Vibrations. Mainly because there's not a whole lot of substance that goes into the album itself. I think A Day to Remember was in a little bit of a fading part of their career in 2016 when they released this. So this entry is just gonna be short and sweet, to the point, Bad Vibrations. And finally, Day to Remember's most recent album, You're Welcome. I think Day to Remember is coming back swinging for the fences on this one. Personally, I wish Miracle was put on this album and not released as a single, but since it was, I'm gonna give Brick Wall the number one spot on this list. I know a lot of people might say it is a very repetitive song, and it is, but the chorus to it and the drops it has make it an enjoyable experience while being repetitive. It's a song you can listen to on repeat over and over and over again. It gets you excited that Day to Remember still out there making music. It gets you excited to know that Jeremy and the gang are still doing great things. I'm gonna give the number one spot to Brick Wall. Well, there you guys have it. Every studio album that A Day to Remember is released, we just went back and looked at the number one song, our personal number one song on that list. If you guys have a different opinion, please leave it down below. I would love to hear your guys' feedback. And leave any video suggestions you would like down below, or any feedback that we could be doing better here on our channel is always more than welcome. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more music related content like this music list that we just made, or vinyl reviews or music festival coverage such as Louder Than Life and Sonic Temple coming up this year. Guys, I really hope you enjoyed the video. My name is Cadillac Mike with Crossing Aces Media. Y'all enjoy your day.